Welcome, everybody, to an all-new episode of Crushing Comics. We are here to continue our epic X-Men reread. We are rereading the classic Claremont X-Men, and today we're up to the issues Uncanny X-Men 100 and 101, the birth of Jean Grey as the Phoenix, as well as the corresponding revisions to those stories and backup stories in classic X-Men 8 and 9. So here's our spoil warning. We are going to spoil these issues thoroughly and completely. We're probably also going to talk about a lot of other things in the especially Tyler. We're going to also talk about a lot of things happening in the Claremont run, beyond the Claremont run. In fact, due to one of the scenes in these issues, we're actually also going to talk about House of X and Powers of X. So you're going to potentially be spoiled on things from all of those. We will try to avoid spoilers that come after House of X and Powers of X, but it still could come up, but we will just try to give you an ample warning if our conversation takes a turn in that direction. So I'm joined here by two of my favorite comic readers and friends from around the world, Tyler and Fariha, and we're going to dig into actually what is the oldest issue of X-Men that I personally own, Uncanny X-Men 100. I got it at my first Comic-Con. And, you know, it starts out with these X-Men fighting each other on the cover, but, like, I think the jig is up pretty quickly once we start reading, because it's pretty clear, A, that this other X-Men team is not in space on this space station where we're fighting, but B, we just saw Cyclops and Jean and Professor X, and it's pretty clear that it's not them. So to me, this feels like a bit of kind of silver age frivolousness, because it's I don't know that you ever really buy that they're fighting the X-Men, but it makes a great cover to sell comics with.
Well, and Hank is not blue.
Hank is also not blue or fuzzy. Yeah.
That kind of what gave it away for me, that Hank is not blue. But then at the same time, I thought that he probably kidnapped the other ones. You know, I just like for a little while, I thought that he probably kidnapped the other ones. But then I thought, like, thematically it was about, like, fans fighting, that the old X-Men versus new X-Men.
It totally is. I think it totally is.
Yeah, but something that I think at that time people didn't necessarily care for the old X-Men. That's why they had the new characters to begin with. But now at this time it's like, oh, those are not my X-Men. It just kind of felt a little bit like that, that Steve Lang. Yeah, he's talking about that. But yeah, I feel like this is also the origin of Wolverine. We talked about that. This is the origin of Jean Grey Phoenix, but it's also the Wolverine stabbing women. Is the origin of that, even though it happened to be a robot woman, but he got his idea here.
Yeah, there's a lot of Wolverine firsts in this issue, which we will dig into deeply in just a moment. Tyler, anything you want to add to that initial assessment?
No, I think the two of you covered almost everything from every angle possible. So
I also want to put a disclaimer, though. I really like Wolverine. The fact that this is where he started is breaking my heart.
Wait. Which Wolverine do you like? Do you like the smelly Wolverine, or do you like the samurai Wolverine? Like, which Wolverine? There's so many versions of him.
I know. I mean, there's I think I like the Jason Aaron's version. That whole run, that version. He kind of went somewhere
as a
with
teacher.
It. But yeah, as a teacher, he went somewhere with it. I feel like that version I like, but it's just a lot of it. I'm like, stop it. And also as a Canadian, I take it personally.
Well, in a couple of issues. Well, not a couple of issues, but not too far down the road, his characters will change.
I hope
quite a bit.
Thank you. Yes, and also I was saying that as the Canadian representative in X-Men, he is not doing a good job.
I think it really takes Claremont having John Byrne as a Canadian representative to turn Wolverine into a compelling character.
Because that's the reason why Wolverine became more compelling, because Byrne was like, no, I'm Canadian. He's Canadian. I can't write, don't write him like that.
Yeah, we're much nicer than that, was Byrne's maybe argument. But anyway, so let's talk about this. There's three significant things for Wolverine in this issue, and let's disassemble each of them in turn. So first we get the debut, I verified that this was true, of Wolverine and Colossus doing the fastball special, a time-honored tradition. So that's one. Two is the idea of Wolverine the killer with these extra human senses. Like, we've got a few hints of these up until this issue, but there's definitely this sense of he's like, I don't need to see the face to know that this isn't the real X-Men. And this is the first time we really see him like really operating on instinct, even if it's not full Wolverine rage, right? So that's an interesting thing to learn about him. And then, of course, there is his habit of disemboweling women. And this is like the first use of it. Even though it turns out to be a robot, we still get that thing that we use with Wolverine a lot, which is like his claws going in and the shocking page turn before we realize that he hasn't really killed a woman, which is something that's just used an awful lot with Wolverine. So let's start from the good and then get a little bit deeper into that. First fastball special. They've been apparently working on it all the time in the danger room, but this is the first time they've had a chance to use it in the field.
I really enjoyed that because I kind of first known about it from Joss Whedon's X-Men. That's where I first seen it. But the thing is, like, I feel like it's, I was like, yay, I know this. This is what I know. Like, you know. And then later down the road, there's also a reverse version of it. We'll see. But the thing is, like, you know, I was like, yay, this is where it began.
Yep. I mean, this is really... like I think Peter said in one of our previous episodes, that this is the era where Claremont is trying to figure out how the team dynamics are, how the powers are, and how they work in relationship to each other, and how they're going to be used more interesting in various interesting ways. So yeah, I mean, you know, fastball special. I think for any X-Men fan, you say fastball special, they know what it is.
Well, and it's almost it's transcended just being Colossus and Wolverine at this point. It's any two characters being thrown anywhere at this, or one character throwing any other character. But so I think people do have a general knowledge that it's Colossus and Wolverine, but it's actually what am I trying to say? It's through all media. I'm pretty sure I've seen them do a fastball special in Lumberjanes. Like it's really just everywhere. Permeated was the word I was trying to say.
Right.
Oh. I was thinking of permutation because I think there was one where Polaris threw Laura as a Wolverine.
I think I was trying to say many permutations in many. It's fully permeated, many permutations. I don't know. I was a little bit lost. So we also get Lang, who in classic like mad scientist tradition is just totally unhinged. What is his plan here? He's made human sentinels because he wants them to be more subversive and make mutants look even worse, but he's using them to fight the X-Men, but he's got some other X-Men captive. Like, just put them out our airlock. Like, what are you doing here, Lang? Like, what is the plan?
And wouldn't it be much more interesting if we put this like real life looking or like LMD type X-Men characters into like real world and like not real world, like in the world, and then have them do all kinds of craziness. But then like a much more interesting propaganda usage of like his creation rather than like, yeah, what X-Men fight. This is like weird. Like it's like,
well, he didn't really think through. He didn't think it through. He's like, oh, I know what is cool. I know what would be cool. Let's create the old X-Men to fight the new X-Men. And
and it's also like I think like an old-timey comic logic, like that's at work here, like rather than thinking it through.
Yeah, which is, comics that we don't need everything to make perfect sense. Comics can just be fun, but it's just really funny to me because Lang has them on the ropes, and like it's many unforced errors on his part that results in the end of this. Whenever I reread this, I always think, why would you waste your first set of them? But I get that he wants to try them against the actual X-Men and make sure that they're not left wanting, and it turns out they are. So he probably would have failed with whatever his master plan was. Bad science is bad science. I think this is really an argument in favor of the scientific method and thorough testing.
So Peter, there's a question. So go ahead first.
No, I was just saying that if you want to get a little bit more like technical with it, it's like, so what, like, do they have feelings? Like, because it seems like Jean, the way Jean was talking to Lorna, the fake Jean was talking to Lorna, it feels like they knew each other. There was some history behind them, and then they kind of made you kind of think like, oh, are they like, do they have their
Sentient?
feelings and are they sentient, and do they have their thoughts and feelings, and how do they feel about all of this?
Well, because there's a scene of like the ex-Sentinel Jean mind blasting Wolverine, right?
Oh, yeah, there is.
So yeah, I mean, so there's that question. But I was about to ask Peter a question about art because I have not read a lot of comics in the era. Is it common for comics in the era to open with like a full page and then followed by a splash page kind of thing, or is this more Cockrum style?
Well, I think the opening on the full page is pretty common because, again, they were selling these primarily on the newsstand. Like, kids would open up to the first page to see if they were going to get their value. And while early splashes are relatively common, I want to say, I mean, I don't have like my full set of Marvel Masterworks open in front of me right now. I think Cockrum was kind of known for being able to pull off these big things. Plus, issue 100, even though it was an extra length at the time, was still significant, even if X-Men had been on pause for 30 issues in between. But
yeah,
I do
27
think,
issues actually,
yes,
I think.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is technically issue 73, not 100.
And also, while we're talking about art, something I noticed in the credits of this is I believe there are 2 women on the creative team here, both on inks and on colors, or is it colors and letters? And I just think
letters and colors.
Letters and colors. And I just think it's interesting because, we would go so much of the X-Men's history without any women on any creative team. Even today, we're picking up issues of X-Men that, we're lucky if there's one woman who's an editor of the issue. And it's just kind of interesting to me that not only do you have Claremont notable for his writing of powerful women, but half the creative team is in fact women, which is something that you wouldn't even get to say about X-Men 10 or 20 years later than that.
Well, I mean, for the majority of his run, his editors are women.
That's true, yeah, and then won't go on to be writers in some cases.
Correct.
So,
and I mean, sorry, I just wanted to insert the line that Marv Wolfman being the editor here, and then later on going to DC to write the counterpart to X-Men, the new Teen Titans, is kind of interesting.
Well, one final art note, which actually takes us across the issue to the back few pages, which to me is what's significant here, is the difference in how Cockrum draws Robot Jean, who's based on the more Silver Age Jean, the Marvel Girl Jean, and Jean at the end. Her face is shaped differently. The way he styles her hair, of course, is very different. The power, like the way he gives her cheekbones is different. He's definitely drawing an older Jean, which is really goes with the amount of resoluteness she has at the end of the issue here. But it's really noticeable to me when he does the first really tight close-up of older Jean after Lang crashes his little rocket ski into the screen. Like, way to go, Lang. I don't know how much we need to dissect that. that Cockrum is sending us a clear signal in the art here that this Jean is not a child. She's an adult who's kind of in charge of these choices. So I want to dig into nearly every panel of the end here with Jean, but I think I want to start with Fariha because this is her, first experience with this. What did you think of Jean's historic martyrdom here? Was it a good thing or a bad thing to you as a new reader?
Bad thing because it's like we don't have enough women in the team to begin with, and then the fact that if I didn't know what's going to come, obviously now I know that death means nothing in comics. But the thing is, I thought that okay, that's just an odd thing because we're just taking another female character off the board. And at the same time, I wasn't sure where this was coming from. Where her drive to
it's quite new. It's not like we've really seen it.
And the thing is though, because as we are reading it, she was gone for the team because she didn't because of the editorial or how things were set up, and then she just came back, and then these are not necessarily her teammates, even to this day, no matter how much time she has passed. So I wasn't quite sure. I definitely saw her saying that, hey, let's try this idea. I think that would have floated better versus I know I'm going to die, but I'm going to do this anyway. You know what I mean?
But this is her being pragmatic, right? Because no other person on the team could do that.
Right. But then I would I was thinking that mostly instead of like if she was trying to do like more of a team thing, like let's just hey, let me do this while you do this. But this is something that she kind of knew that she is going to die, and then decided.
Well, but
I don't know.
I mean, my defense for that would be the space station is falling apart. So there wasn't really enough time to do a, let's go around the group and see who has a better idea thing. It's like, okay, I'm the telepath here. I'm the only one who's telekinetic, who could probably blocks out as much as possible the solar flare. And I'm the one who could read, Dr. Peter's mind and learned how to fly this thing. So there's no other person, because at that point, I think we have not established that Wolverine has a healing factor. Because if we have established that, it could be like, okay, then, I will stay behind the shield and create a TK, and you can drive while I, might link you two together or something like that. But I think at that point, Wolverine's healing factor has not been established. So,
and like I said, this is just me probably being a little bit more nitpicky, but I was just kind of thinking, I'm like, really, where did that came from?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I was saying. I'm like, I mean, yeah, it is a heroic act, and then I really like that how she's like, now I'm an astronaut, and then she just kind of get that whole zoom.
Yeah, since when are you a qualified astronaut? Since now.
Oh yeah, since now, boom, so all of that was kind of interesting. But the thing is, like, also at the background cycle, it's like, no, Gene, no.
No, but there's also that dialogue from Cyclops. It's like, what and how will you survive the solar flare? You little, what was he going to call her? It's like, X.
You little lady.
I know.
Yeah, I was like, I was like, that's not the way to talk to your girlfriend.
And then Banshee being like, you hit him pretty hard, lassie. And Jean says, I meant to. And then Wolverine is like, what about Big Daddy X? And she's like, my name is Jean, mister. I just love how Claremont gives her a moment with each of these team members, which we haven't really seen, because to Fariha's point, she hasn't really been like on the team. Where she really shows that she has the strength to rebuff all of them, Wolverine included. And then her one tender moment was with Storm, where she's like, I really don't want to argue with you. And Storm says, I'm not going to make you argue. I've kind of like just come to say goodbye. And, it's hard for me as somebody who, I love Jean Grey. She's the reason whenever I come back to comics, it's usually because I think there's going to be a return of Jean Grey. And, it's hard for me to evaluate this, not evaluating it as part of her history and her journey from this very tentative character to this self-sacrificing character to a character who has her own voice. And I do think it's really interesting what Fariha kind of gets off of this, of like, what her first read was Jean just steps in to immediately be like, I'll be sacrificed, that's fine, throw me in there. And part of it is her being pragmatic, but part of it is like, that is kind of who Jean was. There was almost like a lack of, I don't want to say self-worth, but like a feeling like that if she had to sacrifice herself, she would. And many of the X-Men are that. Many X-Men do sacrifice themselves. Almost all everybody we see here does at some point. Banshee does, Cyclops does at one point, Colossus does, Nightcrawler does, Storm is one of the few X-Men who never dies. But I also can't help but think of it in the context of, look at this compared to a decision that Storm would make later in X Factor, or look at this in a decision compared to what Storm would do in X-Men 281, or look at it compared to Eve of Destruction, or look at it compared to the end of Mars. And that, Jean, if I said Storm, I meant Jean, that Jean continues to evolve as a character, and we had to start her somewhere, even if it now to us seems like a quite naive version of who she would eventually become. So I can't help but read it in that context.
Right, and I think probably eventually I'll get there as well.
Well, you might not.
One of the things, because I was actually thinking about whether it was in this issue, but in a previous issue, because someone wanted to be like, oh, leave Professor X alone. We're just gonna go fight. I don't know whether it's this one, and then she says that no, find another way. That we are not going to leave Professor X behind and find another way. That to me that's
quintessential.
Yeah, that's a far more interesting and more stronger character beat than be like, well, I guess I'm going to say. Which as time goes on, maybe I'll understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, two
go ahead,
things to
Tyler.
note though is like this is the first time Wolverine backs down from a strong woman, but it will not be the last time he backs down. You know, being like being confronted by a strong woman. Well, probably not the first time. I think the second time, because the first time was when Storm
told him off.
told him off. Yeah, and then the other thing to note is that if we have not read the backup stories in Classic X-Men, Storm and Jean's relationship would have came off a little bit odd here, because
100%.
yeah, because they will be like, oh wait, what? She left the team. Since when are they good friends? You know, that kind of thing. So yeah, so I think that Classic X-Men story is definitely essential reading. I assume, you know, to get to this point, to get to the what's the word? Gravitas of this scene, you know, the friendship between the two of them.
Yeah, at the
That
time,
is very true.
At the time,
I didn't even think about it. No, I was just saying, I didn't even think about it. That was a backup issue, not actually within the story.
Yeah.
Or else it would read funny.
And it kind of just makes the point that at the time Claremont was writing them as close, kind of just because they were women. Like they had kind of had some little conversations, but there was nothing particularly close about them, and that he actually pretty much inserts all of it wholesale in retrospect. But that's why to this day, I always think that Storm is Jean's best friend. If somebody has to save Storm or somebody has to be happy that Jean is back, like it should always be one for the other. Even though Storm goes on to have many other significant relationships with many other characters, to me, Jean still is primarily connected to Storm. And a lot of it's because of this early work that Claremont does with her. And I just want to point out the juxtaposition here. We go from this very Silver Agey story of like they're fighting themselves, right? That's like a very what you would put on the cover to sell stuff in the newsstands of 60s, to this like totally psychedelic experience that's about radiation and Jean flying this thing through space with all these crazy colors. And it's just such a pivot from a very Silver Agey kind of comic to a very Bronze Agey 70s kind of comic book that's about radiation and has all of these, you know, wild colors.
Well, and also I think without modern coloring, like I'm really amazed by the ability of the artist to do gradation through like they just color it differently, you know. And I mean it's all a solid color, but you know it looks beautiful. Basically.
And this would be ruined by modern coloring. Like I never want to see a modern colored version of the sequence. No, keep it. Because all these, you know, different colors kind of all blending into each other on a rainbow wash is part of what makes it great. So Classic X-Men only makes a few revisions to this issue, and I don't know that they really do too much. There's a little bit of context around the bases kind of falling apart around them, which I feel like I got from the regular issue. There's a little bit more of a moment of like how Cyclops breaks free, which again, I just don't think I necessarily needed. And also they do emphasize for like a heartbeat that the X-Men feel bad about Lang and his little, you know, motorbike exploding. Whereas in the issue, they're like, oh, screw him, which actually I kind of like the screw him version of it better. So this goes to show that not all of Claremont's tinkering is always warranted. I don't know that any of these additions in the Classic X-Men issue make this issue a better read.
Well, it does sort of change the way Lang was killed, because what we saw originally was Jean telekinetically freezing the controls and indirectly killing him.
That's true.
Whereas with that new one, it's like, no, I protected him. Right. And then it was the unexpected explosion that killed him, and not really Jean.
Yeah, Claremont was going a little too hard with the Jean control in the original issue.
No, I mean, I did not. I mean, to be honest, I read the other version as well. I'm like, nah, Daddy Claremont. We're just going to stick to the original version you wrote. Like, we're not being sad about Nazis dying. Sorry, but no. No thanks.
Now we get to Uncanny X-Men 101, which is an interesting issue because it's a transitional issue. We get a little bit of an epilogue to this. I mean, we think Jean's a goner, right? Like if you were a issue by issue reader then, or if you're reading it now with no sense, as my kid did, of what's going to happen, it was like, Jean's going to die, right? And so, you know, we get a couple of things in quick succession. Like Jean lives, she's in the hospital, all the X-Men are there. Wolverine decides that he has a crush on Jean because she stood up to him. So now he's in infatuated with her, which we'll vomit over in just a moment. And then we get this whole other like, oh, so the X-Men should take a vacation, which maybe seems like it's going to be totally frivolous, but then it leads very neatly into another story, which has surprised the Juggernaut at the end. So like this issue, I mean, it's not a lot of story pages, but a lot of stuff happens. I mean, it really just happens so quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. In 15, one's a split page splash. So in 16 story pages, all of the stuff happens.
As I was reading it, though, I honestly thought that I already went through multiple issues. Like, because first of all, these issues are a little bit longer than modern issues, right? So we already know that. But as I was
They're shorter.
Doesn't it feel like longer?
And that's what I meant. I mean, they're shorter in page count, but longer in terms of the amount of content being put in them. So as I was reading it, I'm like, oh, how am I still in 101? at the end of it. Also, I have to say, the amount, because I kind of through osmosis, I know about Phoenix and all the idea of it, through movies and stuff. I was a little underwhelmed by how it was all revealed. Like, I thought that there would be something more and that the whole issue will be dedicated to that. But instead, it was just like, well, we think Jean is dead, but then Jean's like, no, I'm not. And then we are done.
I'm always...
Are we?
Well,
Are we going to say anything?
I'll just say my reaction in the moment, which is that when I reread this issue, I'm always surprised by that because I always build it up to be so much bigger. Like even having just read it in the last year and going back to it for this read, I was like, is that it? Really? She just like pops out of the water and then falls down and that's the end. But I think because, this is the beginning now of 37 issues of graduating build up. And I can almost name like all of the points where we're going to see little inflections. And of course, when you get this in other translated to other media, it does two things, right? First, it feels the need to tell more of the story of how powerful she is up front because it wants to impact you with how important her transition is, which I don't know that Claremont fully even appreciated as he was writing it here. And then the other thing is that it knows it's not going to tell all of those in between stories where we get more and more examples of her power kind of growing and growing. And so it wants to show that in a much more accelerated way. So between trying to make it significant and accelerating it, I think we've seen this moment, I think in the cartoon, we've seen this moment in various ways in the movies. Twice. Twice. And it comes off as being much bigger. And it has tricked even me to expecting it to be bigger in the comic book.
And I think it's just a matter of also internal mental hype that I had. That I was just overhyped too for it. The same way Vader's
appearance.
Right, it's very quick in reality.
It's very you're like, that's it? That's the guy. So I think it just kind of played into it a little bit. But I do want to talk about, though, in terms of we talked about it in a previous episode of building a woman up to be so much stronger and all of that, and then next scene you just kind of cut it up a little bit.
Oh, she's hands to the forehead.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Out of context, in story it makes perfect sense because she just got overwhelmed by all this power, and it just, if any normal being would go through that, perfect, no complaint about that. But the thing is, the whole this whole thing where all the curves are jutted out, it's just I was like, ugh, do we need to do that?
No, but but if you ask a modern I don't know how you call it, image. Okay, let's say just so the image artist draw that scene, her boobs would be 3 times as big, and her butt would somehow be showing in that scene with the angle, right? But if you look at this, it's actually very conservative in terms of sort of accentuated some of the curves. I don't think it's that bad.
No, it's not bad per se, from that point of view, that it's not sexualizing a woman's in a very weak state. It's definitely not doing that, but at the same time it's that I was like, oh, come on. just like, sorry for podcast listener.
I know.
My head
Yeah, we're all just fainting in a very Victorian way when we're making
that's what I'm talking about. Like, why it has to be like the Victorian women fainting. I'm like, okay.
Well, I do want to talk for a moment about that Jean coming out of the water image, because I agree with Tyler. One of the things I actually love about Cockrum is that he draws like semi-realistic bodies. Like, they're a little elongated and they're certainly muscular, but Jean, looks like a real person in doing something powerful here. She doesn't just look like a comic book hero, which I think like adds a little bit. And the same way he was drawing Jean in the last issue too, I think it just adds a little bit to the impact of Jean and makes her that much more likable, that she just doesn't seem like this unattainable cosmic god in terms of how her body looks and how her physicality comes across. But also the coloring on those boots, man. Like, it really reads as reflective gold
Shiny.
On the page.
Yeah.
They're not yellow, they are gold. And you can just the way that it has black to show the kind of the darker part of the reflection, and then a little bit of a darker orange line, and then the bright white of the reflection. I mean, it reads as gold. And I just love when people play with colors to do metallics and to do reflections in a comic book, because it's really hard when you think about like what are the colors really. Even when you look on your computer screen and you're seeing a JPEG of something that's bright silver, like there's no silver, right? It's all being done in representation of RGB colors. And I just think that the boots and the sash, and also like how practical is that sash? Like, oh, I'm remaking myself as the Phoenix. Let's have a sash. Let's, like it. And it's not even like a full-on like modesty sash. Like, it's not really covering up all that much on her costume. It's just a sash, just to have it,
But even then, like, you couldn't think about giving yourself pockets. And just, sorry, I just had to put like a modern female wardrobe joke.
No, but I mean, that sort of brings me back to like Peter's like really, really strong objection to House of X issue 1, where Jean appears in her old Marvel Girl uniform. And I was like, is this your favorite Jean Grey costume?
Oh, the Phoenix one?
Yeah.
I actually have really enjoyed recently. We've been getting a slight remix of her Jim Lee costume with all the orange and the blue, which is a little visually overwhelming, but they've been making the colors so that it works a little bit better with her, to make it a little bit more like green and blue and yellow. And I think the reason people gravitate to the classic costumes, both the Marvel Girl costume and the Phoenix costume, is because Jean looks good in green, like it and a little pop of yellow. And so I think that, but I do find it offensive when we get back to calling her Marvel Girl. She's a grown woman. And the other thing is also the mini skirt, which almost made me laugh in the issue where Wolverine just last episode, like helps her cut her dress too short so she can like maneuver. Like, you're telling me that Jean in the modern day is like, yeah, let's get back to a skirt. Let me flash back to those times when I needed Wolverine to take my clothes off so I could do missions well. So I just have a lot of thoughts on Jean Grey, and I just think that it's like it's inconceivable to me that modern authors are like, well, she feels most at home being Marvel Girl, or she feels most at home in the mini skirt. Like, that to me is ludicrous. I think it's a fundamentally wrong read of Jean Grey.
And it is also like, like shame, like not shame, but, I'm just kind of sad though that they still haven't managed to get me excited about Jean Grey. Like, I am excited about Emma Frost, Kate Pryde, Storm, every other Marvel X-Men character. I don't know about Jean Grey.
Big?
Like, okay.
Wait, are you excited about Big?
I'm saying talking about women characters, Tyler.
So you're excited about Angel.
Okay, Angel.
Yeah.
Even like Angel as like a offshoot character, whatever. Like she serves the purpose. But the thing is, someone who is like this interesting or this like involved
iconic,
in the X-Men, iconic. I'm like, okay. Sure, but to the point of the metallic boots thing, though, I did return one of her statue because the boot wasn't metallic. It was drawn. It was like green. Yellow. I'm like, return.
Yellow.
I don't want that. Like, I saw the picture. I'm like, that's not what it is. Return.
I know.
So while we're in the House of X, Powers of X splash zone, let's talk about the brief Maura McTaggart scene here because it's fascinating. We are dedicating ourselves to rereading some of these things with the knowledge that Maura has come. Spoilers, but we warned you about them at the beginning. Maura now is in her 10th life. She's met these people before. She knows how some of these things are going to go. And she also has communicated all that to Professor Xavier. But they have this moment between the two of them of like talking about how Jean's got to make it through. And it's interesting because you have to wonder, has the Jean Phoenix thing happened that Maura has seen already? It wouldn't, like, would it have happened in life 1 or 2 when she didn't get involved with Xavier? Would it have happened in lives 3 and 4, which are the most like the lives with the Modern X-Men? Or maybe it's 4 and 5. I forget now. Right. Life 3 is anyway. Yeah. But point being, has Phoenix happened before? Or is this all new material to them?
My argument would be Phoenix had happened in one of her life, and Moira is sort of how should I put it? Because this is from this point onwards, it is my guess. So I think Moira has a plan for the Phoenix. The Phoenix what do you call
Force?
Avatar, the host, the Phoenix host, right? So Jean is one of the Phoenix hosts and Quinton Quill is one of the Phoenix hosts. So Jean is the past host, Quinton Quill is one of the future hosts, and the two of them are two of the mutants on the Omega Mutants list.
And also, I will point out that in House of X #2, during Moira's flashbacks to past lives, we do see the Phoenix Five as they are seen in Avengers vs. X-Men. So clearly there's an experience with a Phoenix, but it's very careful in the images that it shows of the team before then to not show Jean as the Phoenix. So it's kind of like open to interpretation at this point, whether we got like a full-on Dark Phoenix saga in a prior Moira life or not.
Exactly. And also, I think in Life 6, Moira learned about the Dominion. And in one of the data pages, the Dominion is only afraid of like universal entities such as Galactus and Phoenix.
The Phoenix. Freya, what were you going to chip in there?
No, I was just going to ask, why is Phoenix constantly hunting this girl? Like, what is up with that? Or is
it just she's the one. It just thinks that she's the best she's the best representation of the Phoenix values in the whole known universe.
No.
And it likes redheads.
My argument would be all writers who don't do their homework thinks that Jean is the best host, which is entirely not true.
Yes, because, I can tell you that. Because
Rachel is so much stronger.
Now we're getting into it. Now we're getting into the true X-Men debates here.
Because Rachel actually, is the host for Phoenix for a long time, and she did not turn dark.
Well, we'll let Freya get there in her own time about 90 issues from now. But I happen to agree with every word that you just said. So Wolverine is in the hospital. They rebuff him. He throws his flowers in the trash. Cyclops is like, she lives. And Cyclops breaks down because all that matters. But I do think there's this really interesting moment with Cyclops where like, let's just acknowledge that Scott has no personality at all and he has no hobbies and all he does is lead the X-Men and love Jean. That's it. If you were like, Scott, let's go to a bar. So what have you really been up to? Well, I led a lot of X-Men. Well, other than that, I do really love Jean. There's just no other layer to Cyclops at all. You have to understand you're in a Cyclops hating zone sometimes when you're on this listening to this program. And so then the X-Men decide, hey, let's take a vacation since Jean is convalescing. I mean, Freya, is there any additional mockery you wanted to make of Scott or Logan in the hospital before we continue?
I mean, Logan thought that he's the only one who's going to be beside Jean's
bedside. He's like, I'm the only one who got her flowers. I'm the only one
he got her flowers.
Yeah, he got her flowers and then says that someone I like and want, and Wolverine wants, he gets. Gross. Like, gross. And then
the caption.
And then the flower is like $1, like, $1 a bunch. That's
how 1970s economics.
At that time.
If we control for inflation, it would be like $7 or $8.
$10 now. $10 now. It's not that interesting. And then he decided to clean up, put his like best outfit with his hat and everything, and then showed up. And then, okay, you did all of that. Just because you saw all these other people waiting doesn't mean you should be throwing the flowers in the garbage. Just still give it to her. Like, what is this? I mean, yeah. And then the whole thing with Cyclops, I've been constantly saying the Cyclops is so boring, but you kind of summarize it all. He's like, leads X-Men, loves Jean, and now probably into Emma Frost too. So that's his third new characteristics that we have. And then father of Cable, fourth one. So,
you know, $1 in 1976, by the way, adjusted for inflation, is $4.57.
Ew, even gross. Still gross. Get like two. Okay, get like two. How about that? Get two.
But Fariha, I have a question for you as a Canadian. Is the cowboy outfit very common in Canada?
No, it's not. It's absolutely not.
But I thought that there's a whole Canadian thing about denim tuxedo, like a people who do denim with like a denim shirt and like a hat. Like I thought that was like a whole trope in Canada.
So I mean, that's the thing.
Or it's the Canadian tuxedo. That's what they call it, right?
Serious? Okay, I've never seen anyone wearing that. I've never seen anyone.
I'm gonna Google Canadian tuxedo.
Yeah, do that, because the thing is, like, I honestly have always kind of hung around in terms of like very diverse side of Canadian people. So I don't know what Canadian white people are up to. So don't tell me. Maybe. Whatever.
Well, there's a whole story behind a Canadian tuxedo, which we won't get into here because Wolverine wasn't officially wearing one since he didn't have a denim shirt on, but it's a whole thing.
Before we move on beyond the Moira plot, whatever here, I have a question for the two of you. Where do you think the Moira and Banshee love, relationship comes into play, given that this is a 10th life? Or why did she fall in love with Banshee?
I think I'm going to have a lot to say about that when we get to Uncanny X-Men, like the Proteus saga and the 120s, because then we have to contend with who she was in a relationship with and to what extent she did that knowledgeably and what Banshee represents in opposition to that. But that's going to be a heavy episode with a heavy conversation, so I'm just going to save it for another 20 issues. I don't know, Fariha, do you see Banshee and go, yeah, that's the kind of guy I would date in my 10th time around?
I am very disappointed in what ex-ladies, what they have available in terms of dating. As of right now, I'll be honest, I'm not seeing much. I'm like, gross to everyone.
I think the obvious choice is Nightcrawler of this choice.
Okay, as of right now,
as of this moment.
Nightcrawler and Colossal are the most two that is like, I'm like, I understand Kate now.
No.
I'm like,
no, keep your dirty paws away from my Colossus.
Clearly we're going to have fun in the 140s when Kitty Pryde hits the scene. So look, the X-Men decide they're going to go on a vacation because Banshee Sean Cassidy gets this letter from turns out he was brought up in a castle. They go to Ireland to visit the castle. Storm thinks the roads are bumpy. Everybody's complaining. And they are invited to, a wonderful dinner, which gives us a terrific sequence of Storm getting fully dressed up. And then Nightcrawler and Colossus are as the case may be, kind of fighting over whose date she is. And Storm, great line, comes back and says, I'm no one's date. The three of us will be going into dinner together as equals. Agreed. And I'm like, you go, Aurora. And then, surprise, this is the Juggernaut at the end of the issue. So does anybody have anything they want to add about the X-Men's Irish vacation before we wrap things up?
I did not know that Black Tom and Banshee were related.
And did you know that Black Tom and Juggernaut were life partners? No, you didn't.
I didn't know that either. I did not know that either, and that really surprised me. I have a lot of questions about Juggernaut that I want to ask in a future episode, but I was like, "Whoa, Black Tom, is that you?" Because now he's like walking around. Spoilers. People. Yeah, now he's walking around in Krakoa as like a poet. So.
Yeah, like, do you think the current version of Black Tom? I mean, we'll get it. Okay, to come next episode because that has way more Black Tom content. We will discuss if the current Black Tom connects to the original Black Tom in Fariha's opinion. Stay tuned. Yeah. So, anything else Yeah, there's a lot of Black Talon and Juggernaut. Anything else does anybody want to talk about here?
Well, it just seems like everyone the X-Men meets is related to them somehow in some ways or another.
Yeah, that's true.
So I mean, I think that is kind of true for now, and then maybe later on it'll be slightly different.
Although now that I'm thinking through like the next 20 or 30 issues, I'm like, well, really, what do we get that's not intimately already connected to the X-Men? But we'll get there. So in the classic X-Men issue, there's some minor revisions. It gives us a few more moments with the team after Jean bursts out of the water, including the unconscious Jean altering the molecules of her costume, which I think like slightly diffuses some of Fariha's comments about Jean, where it's kind of like maybe Jean consciously has kind of, fainted away, but she's still the most powerful person in the room. But I don't know that it was really quintessential, like don't hunt down classic X-Men just for that. And it also gives us a minor dialogue edit to let us know that Black Tom actually expected the X-Men to come with Banshee, which actually makes the whole rest of the story make more sense. But again, these two classic X-Men revisions, not the most revolutionary changes we have encountered.
Yeah. And Storm flying back to get clothing for them because they're going straight to their hospital.
Right. It's like Storm packs their suitcases. Like critical plot development.
Yeah, I know.
But we do have two classic X-Men stories in here. And here's the thing. So classic X-Men number 8, it comes immediately between 100 and 101 to show us Phoenix's intervention in Jean's fate. However, even though Claremont knew that Jean became the Phoenix here, he didn't have the whole Jean in a cocoon plot. That came after Kurt Busiek suggested it to bring Jean back so they could launch X-Factor in 1986, which originally was supposed to either be Jean's sister, now with powers, or Dazzler. So against Claremont's express wishes, Jean had been brought back later. And so this is Claremont, petty as he can possibly be, being like, well, you don't actually get to write that. I get to write that. X-Men is mine. And so Claremont writes what his version of the Phoenix offering Jean her fate is into the story. So this is why we're saying that if you're just looking for like a straight read of Uncanny X-Men, uninfluenced by retcons, even though all these other classic X-Men stories kind of work with the classic X-Men issues, this particular classic X-Men story really recasts how you're going to experience Jean as the Phoenix. That said, we did read it. So Fariha, what did you think about this classic story to add more context to the Phoenix Force?
So, I mean, you're talking about that this is all retcon and all the history behind it.
Yes.
I thought this actually makes the whole thing far more interesting.
So tell us about that. Maybe that's a good argument to always read it here. Maybe it was always a better version.
Right. So the thing is, like, I kind of also understood, like, to me, it felt like, okay, just like, her, like, it just like where she was coming from, the fact that she truly died and this is a new version of her, so that therefore it's not just like gotcha, just like a plot gotcha thing. Like it's like truly something change happened, so there is something to mourn about. And then also like it just kind of, I really like the idea of showing a woman kind of fading away, and then she was like kind of ugly, like it's just like she's fading away, and there's a moment, it's not like, oh, she was still pretty Jean as she faded away, none of that. Like there was like a little bit like her, it's not a
glamorous death.
Yeah, it wasn't nothing glamorous about it. From that point of view, I really also liked it. And then I also see that this was actually a deal Jean made with the Phoenix. Instead, Phoenix taking her over just because Phoenix like redhead. Like it felt like Jean had a lot more to say about this.
More control.
It gives Jean, it feels like it gives Jean more consent in the situation. Like she could have died. That could have been just fine. But the Phoenix actually came with an offer, which like the Phoenix Force is such a diffuse kind of concept when Claremont originally writes it, that this is the beginning of writing the Phoenix Force as a lot more sentient, which would get picked up by Claremont and Davis in Excalibur as well. And so I actually like it for those reasons too, Fariha. Like I fear showing it to people because I think it diffuses the idea of Jean's later sacrifice, but you might actually wind up liking it better because you don't want necessarily to just keep reading about women sacrificing themselves, and it will recast Jean's future sacrifice as Phoenix's sacrifice, which makes the story completely different.
Different.
Yeah.
Possibly. And then that's one of the things, like, because I haven't read forward into it, and I don't know how all of this kind of, so I don't know from in context how that reads, but as of right now it feels like Jean had a lot more to kind of say or do with this, all of this, rather than like, hey, Phoenix just came and just grabbing onto her. It always feels like that, like everything that I know about all of this, it just always feels like Phoenix just came in and like, yep, I'll take this. Like, I don't know.
The thing is, like, these classic X-Men's backup stories are, for some reason, not very well known. And I can
They were hard to get for a really long time. They were only in those two X-Men vignettes. Compilations. They were hard to get. They were out of print. They didn't even have all of them. So it wasn't until the last year that we got things like the classic X-Men omnibus, which is usually behind Tyler, and I happen to have mine here.
Yeah.
And then they immediately also redid it in a pair of trades. So like a lot of these stories, and that caused them to be available on Marvel Unlimited. Which means like up until last year, or maybe it was in the end of 2018, these were just totally inaccessible unless you had the original comic books.
That's true.
Interesting.
That's true. Yeah, because I mean, my opinion is that these are really good stories, and they round out the characters a lot. So it's not so much of we have this big fight or this big villain thing going on, but it's more character moments, which I really love, and yeah, I mean it recontextualizes, and adds a lot of layers to some of these initially two-dimensional characters.
Well, I'm talking about. Go ahead, Fariha.
No, I personally don't actually care for the revisions, because I'm like, no, you get one chance. I'm not interested in knowing your revisions.
None of this George Lucas nonsense.
Yeah, none of that. But I am more interested in, and to be honest, I'm actually not even kind of thinking of them as canon. I'm like, no, whatever the original story said. But the backup story, on the other hand, even though it was written later, it's new stories, it's new environment that the characters are in, and that adds far more interesting stories, and those are, I think, should be quite essential reading and should be read.
Yeah. Well, speaking of giving character moments, Nightcrawler, who probably has had the least moments of everybody, even take into account his backup story we've already read, gets a very weird backup story in Classic X-Men number 9, where he's hanging out with this young boy, which makes him learn how to appreciate himself, but also the young boy is a ghost who just died in the hospital while Jean was in the hospital. Yeah. It's like a very weird kind of like, I don't know, Ghost of Christmas Future kind of, or Ghost of Christmas Present kind of story, and I never quite know what to think about it. I have read this one before, and I don't know. Fariha, Tyler, help me out here.
I was kind of shocked. It's like, how is he still religious after that?
What?
No,
wouldn't that make him more religious?
But why though?
Because the ghost just hadn't ascended to heaven yet.
Yeah, but you assume that it is. But you assume that it is a ghost. But what if it is an angel that is sent to help Kurt?
Or what if it's just a psychic after image that's caused by Jean's phoenix power radiating through the hospital?
Right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was just kind of thinking that, the way he's Catholic, right? Like, yes. I think Catholicism, works. I would think that would kind of give him pause in terms of thinking about afterlife and all of that. So that's one of the reasons I was like, so where did this story go? And as of right now, he's not actually religious.
No, we haven't really seen anything like that.
Yeah, that story hasn't hit him yet. That characteristics. I'm keeping track of 1, 2, 3, what everyone's characteristics is. Nightcrawler's is religious. So that hasn't come yet. But the thing is, I was kind of thinking about it. I'm like, wouldn't that have given him pause? And then the way he talks about death and everything is like, did he forget that event happened to him? Because he doesn't mention it, by the way. Yeah, so maybe it's a non-canon event, to be honest.
It's interesting to see which of these classic X-Men issues get picked up for canon and which don't. Like, anything that's Jean and Cyclops from these classic X-Men issues, I feel like tend to be really canonized because people look for them as evidence. But then some of these things, like Colossus dating the ballerina, maybe that gets referenced. I am racking my brain trying to think if it ever gets referenced outside of other backups. And so Kurt with the Ghost, I think, is one of those that just kind of, I don't think it gets referenced, but I guess we'll find out as we get after 1986 and see if these things get referenced.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, if we make it that far.
Or maybe Hickman will pick it up.
Yeah, maybe that. Oh my
In a
goodness! You
random
never
Maybe
know.
the boy is in the tower.
Oh my
Okay. Before we get into a whole new round of spoilers. So look, if you want to continue our epic X-Men reread with us, the next two issues will be Uncanny X-Men 102 and 103, which will take us through the rest of this Black Tom and Juggernaut story. They also have backup stories in classic X-Men number 10 and 11, but we've actually already read the backup from classic X-Men 10 because it was set during Uncanny X-Men 94. So for next time, you only really need to read classic X-Men number 11. You could read classic X-Men number 16 backup if you want to, because it's thematically linked, but it's not necessarily happening at the same time. So to recap, Uncanny X-Men 102, 103, and the backup story in classic X-Men 11 is your assignment for the next time. So I want to thank Tyler and Fariha so much. These issues, especially these two issues, I have read so many times, and it is so delightful to talk about them in a different light because Fariha, X-Men is for what?
It's better when you read it together.
That's right. X-Men's better when you read it together. We're going to get really good at that to end it. That might be how we end episodes from now on. Origin story. This is like the first fastball special.
Oh my God. This is where you heard it first.
This is Farihatism.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of Farihatisms. I'm sure somebody could put together a wiki. But until we do, this is Peter with my co-host Tyler and Fariha signing off once again from our Crushing Comics Epic X-Men reread. If you're loving this, please let us know that we should continue, and please subscribe to see more and hear more from Crushing Comics. Thanks so much, everybody. Be well.
Thank you. Bye.